I'm a bit late. Okay. Thanks everybody for being here today. And whoa, look at this. Okay. I won't say anything else. Anyway, before we get started, I'd certainly like to welcome our newest members, Senator Fan and Representative McGuire. Thank you so much for doing this. And, you know, as most people here know that we had several years of this committee not meeting. And in 2019, we thought it was really important to bring it back. And I'm very glad we were able to do this. And we're having several people on back in the home districts. And so why don't we begin? But I just want to let you know that we also have in the last few years, we fixed over 8,000, almost 9,000 miles of roads and more than 2,000 bridges. And that's a lot of work by a lot of folks, whether it's DOT folks or the folks locally that are doing the work. And I'm committed in the next budget to make sure that we have adequate funding to make sure we have a modern transportation system. So with that, let's take the roll.
Okay. Governor Evers?
Here.
Senator Carpenter?
Here.
Senator Fine?
Here.
Senator Jacques?
Here.
Senator Jacques?
Oh, there he is.
Here.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Senator Pat?
Here.
Senator Pat?
I think I'm on mute.
Yeah.
I didn't hear it.
Yeah.
Brad, are you here?
I am here. I am here.
He's up here. I saw him on mute too. I don't think we can hear him well.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, we got some virtual.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Senator Tonchak?
I am here.
Okay. I'm trouble hearing the audio, but we can see. Representative Emerson?
Here.
Representative Crew?
Here.
Representative McGuire?
Here.
And then Representative Plummer has a proxy, Mary Curry.
Here.
Representative Spiros. We know Spiros online. Okay, mark that absent. Director Buster,
Here.
Executive Director Hannah,
Here.
Mr. Survey,
Here.
Secretary Gordon. Yeah. Take that for roll.
Great, thanks. And let's bring it over to the secretary.
Thank you so much. Really want to thank all of the TPC members for being here, especially for going through the materials. Again, another welcome to our new members, Senator Fine and Representative McGuire. I too am joining for the first time today, and so I'm looking forward to introducing you to our team that has been working really hard on these projects to prepare them for your consideration here today. We are confident that the projects we're presenting will be transformative for Wisconsin. They implement key safety improvements and make efficient use of state resources. And the TPC's role here today is not to focus on budget specifics, but to acknowledge the value that these projects will bring to Wisconsin. We hope that you'll see how each is designed to improve the quality of life in our communities and support our state's economy. We know that Wisconsin's interstate and highway systems connect us all, and it gets us where we need to go. It brings goods and services to our state, and it helps visitors get around. But these projects focus on very busy routes that will not be able to safely keep up with the travel demands in the coming years. Our team is going to explain how this aging infrastructure is deteriorating, and we must step in and fix it so that we can keep our travelers safe long into the future. So you're going to hear about two important projects today: a proposed upgrade to 67 miles of I-39/90/94 between Madison and the Dells. It is a critical link in the local and national economy and a gateway to Wisconsin's tourism, but it needs improvement to keep up with the demands. The project addresses significant safety concerns along the corridor. Many of the bridges on this corridor are more than 60 years old and do not meet current design standards. This includes the Mirror Lake Bridge, where we know commercial truck crashes have historically been an issue, and we feel an investment in these upgrades is essential to eliminate future safety risks. Also, a redesign of US 51 North in Dane County, one of the busiest routes in the city of Madison. This too has significant safety concerns. This project has been evaluated from its original scope based on feedback and has an approach that has been investigated to address the needs of the corridor. This new approach that's being taken will allow WISDOT to achieve the best results for those that use this busy highway while minimizing the impacts to the businesses and the communities. So this is a priority for us as we carefully consider these types of projects that we're bringing forward to the TPC. And the WISDOT team is also here to update you on some of the other significant projects that we're working on to advance improvements in other areas of Wisconsin. So again, we truly value your participation today. We appreciate the time that you've spent and will today discussing these projects. And please let us know at any point if you have any questions, and we have lots of experts here to answer that. So I think at this time, we are going to move on to the minutes. Is that correct?
Right.
All right.
So all of you have an opportunity to see them. I'll start off by making a motion to approve the minutes. And we have a second. And Mike, would you please call the roll here?
Yep, so we'll call the roll for approval of the minutes. Governor Evers,
Yes.
Senator Carpenter,
Yes.
Senator Fine,
Abstain.
Senator Doc,
Aye.
Senator Pat,
Aye.
Senator Tomchak,
Aye.
Representative Emerson.
Aye.
Representative Curry,
Aye. I didn't know they can use.
Representative McGuire,
Abstain.
Mary Curry, serving as proxy for Representative Collins,
Aye.
Representative Spiro, Director Bustler,
Aye.
Executive Director Hannah,
Aye.
Mr. Survey.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll turn it over to the clerk.
Great. I think we're going to start now with Justin Shell, who is the administrator of the DOT Division of Transportation Investment
Management, and he's going to give an overview of a major highway program.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. So a couple of things. We know we have some new members here today, and some of the things that we have to go through today are probably going to be new to if not many of you or all of you, at least many of you, because it's been a number of years since we've gone through enumeration of a traditional major highway project. So first, I'm going to give you an overview of the program status, and then we're going to go through roles and responsibilities so that you understand what it is that we're doing here today, and you can ask any questions before Scott comes up and presents on the individual projects. So the overall, the report summary for the major highway program, we report to the TPC the status of the program in two ways. The first is you receive a report from us in February and August of each year. And then at these annual meetings, we come and review the most recent report data. So we'll be showing report data from the August 2024 TPC report, and also a comparison of that relative to the February report. So you can see percent change. For the major highway program, really the program has remained pretty stable over the past year. Not much has changed. There were some minor changes to a couple of projects. Those projects are closing out, and so we're seeing some sort of finalization as projects close out, some reductions in project costs. For the Southeast Mega Program, we also report out on that in our TPC report. We have 2 active projects right now, and again, not much has changed on those projects. There's some closing out of the projects as they're open to traffic now. We're currently not reporting on the I-94 East-West project. You can see that the record of decision was signed in March of 2024, so we're still developing what that schedule of construction looks like, and we'll be including that in a future report. And then finally, the major highway study projects. These are projects that have been recommended for study for inclusion in the program. Potentially we could bring these projects to you to recommend enumeration. Again, not much change on these. You will note there was an increase on the US 51 project. That's the Stoughton Road project. That project has been, as we've progressed through study, it's been divided into 2 different segments, and Scott's going to talk more about that project in his presentations. Today, we'll be talking about the northern section. There is a southern section to it. These costs represent costs for both studies. And there's been an increase in costs as we get near to the draft environmental documents for those 2 projects. Major construction project expenditure schedule. Now, to kind of understand what you're seeing here, there's 2 different ways to represent costs for a project. The expenditure schedule kind of represents our anticipated costs of construction as the project goes on. So it's more reflective of where the project is in its construction process, whereas we could also look at things through a sort of a LET schedule, which tells us more how we're going to spend the money from a state budget perspective. So we can see here the Highway 15 and Highway 50, both of those projects have essentially wrapped up. We do not expect any additional expenditures beyond this state fiscal year, while 41, Wisconsin River Bridges, and US 51, that's the Stoughton and McFarland portion, so south of the Beltline. All 3 of those projects have begun construction, and we anticipate expenditures out through at least 28. I'll pause there real quick to see if there are any questions about that before moving on to the next slide.
How does a project rise to the level of getting a study done in the first place? Like,
Sure.
where does that come from?
Yeah, I'll get into that a little bit more later on, but to answer your question, we go through a regular planning process in the department where we're always evaluating the needs on our system, and as needs that analysis. Depending on what the type of need is, we go down two different paths potentially. If it's rehabilitation, we handle those through our highway rehabilitation program, and that's a statewide program. So we have needs across the entire state. We identify those needs, and those are funded through SHRs, is kind of call it. For major highway projects, and we're going to see a definition of what a major highway project is a little bit later. But when we see those needs pop up in our analysis, that's when we have to do some additional analysis to determine what we think the best approach is for those. And then we come here to you, to the TPC, and we have to recommend further study of that project. If approved, then we continue on with that study. If not, then we have to reassess how we can address those needs with maybe perhaps some temporary measures or something. Okay, anything else? Oh, yeah. Do we have audio? If not, maybe.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yes.
Benjamin, I have a question, kind of piggybacks off of Senator Fine. How many studies of areas of roadway, highway, what have you, do we have going at any one time? Is there a limit? What's the criteria?
Question. There's not a limit. And I don't know exactly how many we have right now. I think it's somewhere between the 6 or 7, 5 to, okay, thanks, Mike. We have 5 studies going on right now. But yeah, like I said, there's no limit on how many we study. Certainly we have to assess what our budgets are. I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
Well, study isn't, okay, so now you've created another question. So we have to assess what our budgets are. So there's a budgetary impact on the number of studies that you can do at any given time. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, anytime you have a project, there's going to be a budgetary impact. Yes.
I didn't say that, a study.
Well, yes. I apologize. When I said a project, I'm thinking in my terms, it's a study. I would call a project, but it's a study project, correct?
All right, I understand. And in response to Senator Fine, you had said that we're going to hear more detail about that. I'm very curious as to how a project or how a section of roadway rises to the top of getting action. So hopefully we'll get that kind of detail. Yes.
I was planning to cover it at a high level today, but we can discuss more if there are specific questions as we go through it. And then certainly we can provide additional information to you after the meeting to help understand.
I appreciate that opportunity. You alluded to that we can do these things when we can move forward with recommendations when the TPC meets. To my knowledge, we meet annually. Is that correct?
Correct. That's the expected schedule. Yes.
Is that frequent enough?
I will leave that to others to decide.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks. I'll let you get back on with your process. Thank you.
Okay. A couple of other things to note here. We've had some projects that are fully complete with their construction. And as we get to the point where those projects have been completed, there are no more expenditures, we go through a process to remove those projects from state statute so that they're no longer represented in the program, though we still do note them I believe we still note them in the report that you receive regularly. So those are the 4 projects that we expect to remove from statute this year. I would also note State Highway 23 is currently open to traffic. And so in our reporting, we'll be moving that from active projects to the mainline open to traffic section. Okay. I'll go over the roles and responsibilities over the next couple of slides, and then I'll give a quick overview of the project that Scott's going to talk about here in a few minutes. There are really 4 core responsibilities for the TPC. I'll go through each one of them here real quick. It's to review and approve or deny potential major highway program projects for environmental studies. So that's the process we were just talking about, where we've identified need and we need to go through the environmental process. We come to you seeking approval to begin that process. Once we've gotten through that environmental study process, we come back to the TPC looking for a recommendation for enumeration. Now we're going to talk about the different kinds of major projects in a second. And I'll probably say this a couple of times, for a traditional major highway project, we make a recommendation to the TPC for enumeration. The TPC makes a recommendation, if you decide to the governor and the legislature for enumeration. Those projects are actually enumerated through the state budget process. So the commitment to funding happens through the state budget process. And a recommendation by you to enumerate does not commit funding to the project. So it's an important distinction. And then review and approval or denial of a high cost major project. So this one is a little different. Those projects are not specifically enumerated in state statute. So when we bring those projects to the TPC and you approve a high cost major, that is approval to commit funding to those projects, and we can begin construction immediately. And then the last responsibility that the TPC is just to monitor ongoing highway program project costs and schedule, which is what we just went through and how we report to you through the TPC report. So I've talked a couple of times about major highway projects, the traditional project versus the high cost project. We thought we'd just give you a definition of exactly what those are. So the traditional major project typically focuses on some type of system expansion. It's a project that costs more than $30 million, and we're either relocating or building new highway, we're adding lanes, or we're converting an existing highway to freeway standards. The high cost major it could be any type of rehabilitation project. So it's a project, as we're going through our standard study, or I'll say planning and study process through the State Highway Rehabilitation Program, we determined that the cost of that project exceeds a certain threshold. In statute, that number is $75 million, but I'll note that both of these numbers, the 30 million and the 75 million, are statutorily indexed to inflation. So we use our Wisconsin Construction Cost Index to modify those numbers on an annual basis. That's published in October of each year through the newspaper and on our website, so that it's publicly available. The current numbers for those thresholds are 51.5 million and 128.8 million. So this is where I'll kind of go through the process of how we get to where we are today. As I've said a couple of times, we go through an annual planning process. That's a long-term, long-range planning process. And as we identify needs on the system, those needs are identified through our asset management program. We're looking at pavement needs, structure needs, safety needs, and operational needs like capacity and other things. Out of that process, when we've identified a need to address a facility that includes or meets one of those definitions of a traditional major highway project, that's when we bring it to the TPC for approval to study. That happens in the odd years. You can see here, we bring that to you. There's a recommendation, and if approved, there's several years of study before we then come back to you to recommend a project for enumeration. If we're going to recommend enumeration, we have to make that recommendation to the TPC no later than September 25th, or I'm sorry, September 15th of the even year. So you received a letter from the department indicating that we were going to be bringing some projects today, September 15th. And then the TPC needs to meet, if you're going to make a recommendation to enumerate, that recommendation needs to occur no later than December 15th of the even year. Couple of things to note on this process is we have to demonstrate to the TPC that we have an approved environmental document for a traditional major highway project. Scott's going to cover that in his presentation. We also need to demonstrate that we can commence with construction in the next 6 years with that project. And we'll have a slide showing that let schedule a little later on in the presentation. The process to become a high-cost major project looks a little different. So you see the sort of the same steps here. What actually happens with high-cost major is because the study process is happening within our state highway rehabilitation program. We don't come to you looking for approval because it's expected to be a standard rehabilitation program or project. We only bring the project to you when we have that draft environmental document and we've determined that we've crossed the cost threshold. At that point, we bring the project to you. That can happen at any time. It doesn't have to, it's not tied to a even odd year like the traditional major projects. So those could be brought to the TPC at any point. I'll pause there. Yeah, I was going to say for the high cost major. So it's coming out of the major program. So it's coming out of the same appropriation as the traditional major highway projects. So a little later, we'll see what our budgets, or I'll talk a little bit about our budget. Everything has to live within that same budget. Okay. To pay for construction. Yeah, for the study, that's going to come out of SHR, which is a different appropriation. Okay, any other questions? I know I probably went through that pretty quickly, and I couldn't quite catch who had the questions earlier about planning, but did you have, was it Senator Tomczak? Okay. Did you have any follow-up questions on that? Okay, thank you. All right. So I'll quickly go over the projects that Scott's going to talk about here in a second. So we have one project that is a traditional major highway project. That's the I-39-90-94 project from Madison to the Wisconsin Dells. Oh, I see your hand up, Senator Tomczak.
So I understood what you just presented on, but I don't know if that answers the question that I and Senator Fine were looking for. I mean, what you presented was a plan. These are the steps, but what's the criteria?
The criteria for determining whether to enumerate a project?
Right. So this section of highway in Polk County is bad, and this section of highway that runs through Iron and Washburn is bad. What makes the difference between the two of them? How do you decide which one's a priority?
Well, again, those kinds of decisions happen through. So let me start over. So the major highway program focuses specifically on capacity type issues. If we need to expand capacity on a facility to address safety or operational needs, then typically that is going to be handled through the major highway project program. What I don't know if this is what you're trying to get at, but
Nope.
many of the needs on the system across the entire state are addressed through our state highway rehabilitation program. I
appreciate that, but do you put a special weight on number of accidents, or is it car counts that go first, or age of the pavement surface, age of the bridges? How is in a project, I gotta assume that somebody somewhere says, hey, we know that that's a problem down in Polk County, but up here in Washburn, that bridge is damn near 70 years old. And it doesn't have the traffic count, but it's in worse shape. Is there no weighted system, no point system that says, oh, well, we better work on that bridge first?
Well, so we do have an asset management system that identifies and prioritizes need across the system, but that's handled through the State Highway Rehabilitation Program, not the Major Highway Program. So they're two totally different programs. They have two totally different funding streams and appropriations.
So does this program have something similar then?
Which program? The Major Highway Program?
Well, you just said the one I'm addressing isn't the one we're talking about today. So yeah.
The State Highway Rehabilitation Program. Yeah, we have an asset management system that identifies all of the pavement condition needs. We do an annual evaluation of the entire system. So we collect pavement data on the entire system every single year. And we evaluate the pavement condition on every mile. That gives us what we call the pavement condition index number that tells us something about the distresses on that facility. We also have regular inspections of our bridges that produce a bridge value.
I expect those things, but how do you then apply a weighted system to decide which is the priority? So how did we have two projects today. How did these projects rise to the top over all the other potential projects we have in the state of Wisconsin?
So the two projects that we're talking about today, how did they rise to the top?
Correct.
One is an expansion project. And the other is again, it crosses that cost threshold okay,
Ben, forgive me, Ben. I'm just a simple senator. I don't know much. I'm just trying to understand the process of how did we decide? Boy, this section here from Madison to Dells is terrible, which I agree with. Or this section here, the Stoughton Road project. God, this is terrible. It's much worse than Main Street and Mosinee. How do we decide that?
We'll get into this a little bit more, and it talks about, yes, we're doing those pavement condition analysis on an annual basis. When we get into the details of these projects, we're going to talk about level of service and how we're projecting that into the future. Also, the stability of the structures with those bridge inspections that we're doing. And then, of course, we have crash data. We know where we're having significant safety concerns. And on some of these, we'll see based on the knowledge we had when it was constructed and the impacts that that's having on everyday travel now, we'll talk about that. But I know that when we're bringing projects here to talk about what should we study, we are lining them up against a number of things, and we are applying, numeric scores to this and bringing those ones with the highest need to you. So we are very aware of the amount of funding that we have and balancing that within the program budgets that we do and finding the highest priority at the right time to make the maximum difference. But I think we'll get into some more of those specifics as Scott goes through the program, if that's okay.
That's fine. I'm struggling with how that system works, but I'm sure that someone's going to tell me how. So I look forward to getting that information.
Okay. Well, I'll just quickly go through the I-39 here. Again, this qualifies as a traditional major project. It's addressing traffic demands, safety issues, and outdated infrastructure across the corridor. The current estimate for the project is $3.7 billion in current year dollars, with the anticipated completion date of 2051. A 2-year delay to enumeration would add approximately $392 million to the total project costs. And because many of the needs on the corridor are related to pavement condition and structural needs, again, if not enumerated, these needs will have to be addressed through the State Highway Rehabilitation Program, and we'll need to address them in a much longer time frame. So there's potential to add even more cost to that. The next project is the US 51 North segment on Stoughton Road. This qualifies through the high cost major program. The current estimate there you can see is $174 million. We anticipate completion of the project in 2033. This addresses safety and operational issues through this portion of the corridor. And again, because this is a high cost, we're only showing a 1-year delay because we can, again, bring this project back at any time for consideration. We had anticipate it would add approximately $8 million to the project if it was delayed a year. So getting to the point I made earlier about needing to demonstrate that we can commence construction on the projects that we're recommending within 6 years. You can see here the current status of the program. This is the LET schedule. And the blue bars represent the currently enumerated projects in the LET schedule for the next 7 to 8 years, I believe that is. The yellow bar across the top is our current program level. You'll notice in 2025, we exceed that program level. That was due to some federal discretionary grants that we were able to get for the Wisconsin River bridges and I-41 and I believe it's 41 or 43, I can't remember which. But anyway, you can see here that as we move into 26 and 27, we start to see that program level of blue projects dropping down. We believe that I-39, which is the orange bar, and US 51, which is the gray bar, can easily slot into those at our current program level, and that we could commence as early as 2029 and certainly by the 2031 date, which is the 6-year mark if enumerated this year. So that's all I have for my presentation. I'll see if there are any other questions before I hand it over to Scott. Okay, thank you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Scott Shaneman. I'm the director for the Bureau of State Highway Programs. Here to talk today about the I-39 project as well as 51. Before I get into that, though, just a little bit of background about myself. I've worked in the majors program in some way, shape, or form since about 2010. Started off doing construction, inspection, project engineer work up on the I-41 expansion project in Green Bay. Came to DOT in about 2016, worked on the I-39 expansion from the Illinois state line up to the Belt line. And then joined the Bureau in 21, and as I said, became the director here about just over a year ago. So again, taking this majors program journey here today to talk about some potentially new major projects. Okay, there we go. Took a second. Looking at, so for this project, we're going to go over the history and location, the importance of the route, the purpose and need of the study, the preferred alternative, the costs and construction sequencing, and then our recommendations. So looking at the corridor, as was mentioned, it was originally built in the 1960s, pretty much the whole thing from the 67-mile corridor, starting at just north of the Beltline interchange, going all the way up past the Dells to US 12 in Juneau County. This project was originally, the study for this project was originally kicked off in 2011. In 2017, it was paused just due to priorities and funding, and then it was resumed here in 2022. This corridor, or this project, is looking at expansion from the Beltline all the way up to the Dells, as well as looking at improving all of the interchanges along the way. So there's about 15 service interchanges. Those are our standard terminal type interchanges getting on and off the highway. And then it also has 3 system interchanges, which is our free flow ramps going from freeway to freeway. So we have 3 of those. One is at the 94, where that comes in towards Milwaukee. We've got one at the 151, and then one up at the Portage split where 39 goes north. So those are 3 system interchanges. We'll also be doing some work to the east on 94, the spurs based off those system interchanges, 151, and then portage up to the north there. And we're also evaluating 2 new interchanges, one at Milwaukee Street on 94, just to the east, as well as Hepker Road in between 151 and US 51 there. So this corridor, very important, has a lot of traffic. On average per day, we're at about 40,000 in the more rural sections, up to 110 in the more urbanized sections. And to get a feel for that, that 40,000 would be about from Madison to the Wausau area on 94 there. That's kind of that 40,000-ish range. And that 110, that would be then going on 94 from Waukesha towards downtown Milwaukee, or 94 south of Milwaukee going down towards the Illinois state line, Chicago area, which was also recently expanded from 6 lanes to 8 lanes. Along this corridor, it's one of the heaviest truck routes in the state. We've got 19 to 31%, or approximately 25% trucks. It also has a large impact or large economic impact, approximately $5 billion in 2023, as far as economics moving through the corridor related to tourism. If we look at the counties just to the north of there as well, that adds in another $2.5 billion or 10%. So a lot of movement through this corridor. And as mentioned before, it also acts as kind of a gateway through this, the state, connecting Madison, Milwaukee, Chicago, Twin Cities, and all over the Midwest. So when we're talking about that the freight movements in this corridor, this past year there was approximately $120 billion worth of freight that traveled through this corridor. 9.1 in wood and paper products, 12.5 in machinery, approximately 7.5 in farm equipment, 18.5 in food products, with over 20,000 trucks per day using this corridor. As you can see on the heat map here, obviously it lights up bright red. The only other corridor in the state is again that 94 in the Milwaukee area, which again was recently expanded from 6 to 8 lanes. But you can see here that even if it's not directly along this corridor, however, you can see the heat map, how everything kind of spreads out and things are sprawl from this corridor. So no matter where you're at in the state, you're likely impacted by goods and services moving through here. This route is also important just as far as the mobility and operational convenience to get to access to healthcare facilities. With that potentially new Hepker Road interchange, that also does provide some emergency vehicle access to the interstate if there were to be an accident within that area. And this project has had a lot of support. There's been a coalition group that's formed, the Central Wisconsin Interstate Alliance. It's formed up of tourism groups, local municipalities, businesses, industry, in support of the project. And at all of our involvement meetings, we've had overwhelming support and feedback. So looking at the study, the purpose and need, we're going to be addressing the safety issues that exist out there, looking at the aging and outdated infrastructure, looking at and updating the traffic and operational conditions, and also improving the resiliency of the corridor. We have flooding up near that portage split. It's known, and with this project, we're going to be able to address that. So looking first at the safety throughout the corridor, again, it was built in the 60s. It currently has substandard geometrics. And what does that mean? That could be anything from left-hand on-off ramps, turn lanes that aren't long enough, or ramps that aren't long enough, things that are spaced too closely, on-ramps that are spaced too closely. They exist up and down the corridor, and it's known, and that we'll be addressing them with this project. So currently, over 70% of the corridor exceeds the statewide average as far as crashes go. We have on average 2.5 crashes per day, 4 to 5 injury crashes per week, and unfortunately a fatality approximately every other month. And without this project, we know that those numbers are going to increase. Traffic is going to keep going up. Those rates don't go down. But with this project, we know that we can decrease those mainline crash rates by approximately 11 to 13%, and that translates into about 30 to 35 injury crashes over the course of a year. So those are real crashes, people actually getting hurt. And also that 11 to 13%, we're hoping that that's on the low end. When we're looking at some of the recently completed major projects, like the I-39 just to the south there, crash rates have reduced by approximately 25%. We're looking at I-94 from Chicago up to Milwaukee. We've seen about a 14 to 20% reduction in mainline crash rates there. So again, hoping that those are on the low end, but being conservative with our numbers. And then when we're talking, again, with safety, we're talking kind of about the mainline crash rates there. We also have specific interchanges that we're going to be able to modernize, improve, and drive those crash rates and fatalities down even lower, because that's where a lot of those crashes do occur. So for some of those examples, we've got the US 12, which is up near the Wisconsin Dells exit. With the improvements that we're looking to make there, we anticipate fatalities would be reduced by approximately 20%. Cascade Mountain Road interchange. This one is underutilized and has a lot of safety issues. With our build alternative, we're going to be removing that interchange and eliminating all of those crashes. That will now be serviced by Highway 78 that goes through that area. We also have Wisconsin 19, which is in the DeForest Windsor area. That intersection, as anyone who's probably driven through it, you get off, there's a handful of lights, there's railroads. It's a very busy intersection and a lot of crashes. So with these improvements, we'll be able to reduce those by approximately 50%. And to illustrate one of the more probably common known issues here with the left-hand on-offs, this is representing any PM peak period, so a Thursday night, heading southbound on I-39, 94 at the 151 area, heading towards that 94. We've got approximately 2,000 vehicles coming down the interstate. We got another 2,000 getting on at High Cross or at 151, another 700 getting on at High Crossing. And we know that there's some amount of traffic that needs to go all the way from those on-ramps all the way over to 94. You're making approximately four to five lane changes within a 1.5 mile section. And the more lane changes we make, the more dangerous things become out there. So there's a lot of weaving that goes on in this section because of some of those left-hand turns. And on the weekends, these numbers are almost doubled. So we've got almost 4,000 cars coming down the main line, 2,000 going off to 94. The 151 is a little bit reduced on the weekends, not as much commuter traffic, but there's high volumes out there and a lot of movements. Same thing on the northbound side, as I'm sure most people are aware of. If you're going from the Madison area up towards Sun Prairie, a lot of weaving movements that occur through those segments. And as you can see, the more lane changes we need to make, the more potential there is for incidents to occur out there. With the build alternative, we're going to be separating a lot of those movements into collector distributor lanes. So where they've got kind of the median separated or barrier separated lanes to the outside, where you make all those on-off ramp movements, and then the main line is free to keep moving. Still hitting on safety, but going to structures now. We've got approximately 113 structures throughout the corridor. 60% of them are near the end of their useful life as of today. And then we've got a lot of bridges out there, again, built in the 60s that are structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. Fancy words for just saying that they're out of date. They don't meet modern standards anymore. We know we have issues, as mentioned, at the Mirror Lake, where we've had incidents with truck traffic going off that bridge. And those structures are also considered fracture critical. So again, what that means is, if a structural member of that bridge were to be taken out by a semi or something, there's a high likelihood that the entire bridge would collapse. Thinking about a structure, more modern structures that are not fracture critical, you could think about the Leo Frigo Bridge up in Green Bay, 2013. I think that had a pier failure. But fortunately, there's enough steel in the deck that that bridge held, and vehicle actually went across it before State Patrol got out there and was able to shut it down. But that would be an example of a structure that could sustain some damage and still be standing. And again, as mentioned, at Mirror Lake, we've had issues with semis going off, and unfortunately, in 2019, there was a fatality at that bridge. So with this project, we'll be able to stage our construction to kind of line up with the asset life of those structures and be able to prioritize and maximize it. Looking at our traffic, again, all tied back to safety. We've got 40 to 110,000 vehicles within the Madison area with steady growth projected. Again, we have about 25% trucks, and when we're looking at operations, the heavier truck percentage has a heavier hit on those operational impacts versus just standard vehicles. And this area also, or this corridor experiences some unique traffic patterns. At any time we have our travelers going from point A to point B that are going through the corridor. We also have our weekday peaks for our commuter traffic that is going north and south. And then on the weekends, we have our tourism traffic. Usually starts on a Thursday evening, runs through Friday and Saturday. But no matter when people leave for the weekend, everybody comes back on Sunday afternoon. And so, that's where we get a lot of these traffic conditions. And one accident on a Sunday afternoon, as I'm sure a lot of people have probably experienced, can back things up for hours or detour that takes quite a lot of additional unplanned time. So we're going to look at the entire corridor and its level of service after this, but just to kind of explain level of service, we assign letter grades to certain segments. We've got our A's, B's, and C's up on top, which are always desirable, almost no or minimal traffic. We also have our D conditions, which are acceptable in urbanized areas, although in the rural sections, we're shooting for the A's, B's, and C's. And then we have our E's and F's, where we're noticing significant delays. And in the F scenario, that's when we get into major backups, stop and go traffic along the interstate. So looking at the corridor today, that is the left-hand side graphic and also the left side of the bar chart there. We have a lot of C's, D's, and some E's conditions. So currently, approximately 3/4 of the corridor operates at undesirable operational conditions. And then when we look out to 2050, we see a lot of those C's, D's, and E's flipping over to, again, D's, E's, and F's, especially in the Madison area and up in the Dells area. With this project, we're going to be able to make all those operational improvements throughout the corridor, add in the additional lane for capacity expansion, and we will be at 100% desirable conditions throughout the corridor with the build scenario. There are a couple of D level of service areas in the urbanized areas, but again, those are acceptable for that area. And lastly, looking at the infrastructure needs of the pavement, again, this project was, most of this was built in the 60s, so a lot of it is coming up on its next major pavement replacement. The map on the right, a little hard to read in the corner there, but the deep red, or this map is representing when the next major pavement replacement or pavement project is due along the corridor. So the deep red is areas that need to get addressed by approximately 2032. The orange goes out to 2045, 2040. The yellow goes out to 2045, and then the green is beyond that. So the majority of the corridor needs. The majority of the corridor has pavement issues that need to be addressed, whether this project occurs or not. And then lastly, for our corridor needs, we have the flooding area that I had mentioned. There was a handful of, there's been several flooding events, one in 2001, two in 2004, 2008, 2018. We've had diversion. We've had National Guard out there doing sandbagging and maintaining the interstate. Not only does it get shut down, but also when you have that amount of water, it gets into the subgrade, topples the pavement. It just leads to accelerated deteriorating conditions out there. So with this project, we're going to be able to raise up the roadway approximately 3 to 5 feet and utilize our existing floodplain within that area to basically capture the majority of the water and be able to handle these flood conditions. There's also been a lot of coordination with Wisconsin DNR, Fish and Wildlife to ensure that the alternatives that we're putting forward works with the citizens or works with the residents in the area and is the preferred alternative. So with that, looking at our preferred alternative, we're going to be, as I've mentioned a couple times, we're going to be modernizing, improving every interchange along the corridor. We're also going to be looking at that capacity expansion. So starting on the south side, taking off from the Beltline interchange, we've got one added general purpose lane, so up to 8 lanes plus auxiliary lanes, which acts somewhat like that 5th lane in between the Beltline interchange up to the 3094 system interchange. Between the 3094 up to the 151, that'll be 8 lanes plus those 2 collector distributor lanes on either side for all of those movements. And then after 151, we go back to our 8 plus 2 auxiliary lanes. And then from there on up at 19, it'll just be the 8 general purpose lanes. And then after our split at Portage, we'll be adding 1 lane. So going from 4 to 6 up towards the Dells. And then the split up towards Portage will remain at 4 lanes. So again, with this project, we'll be able to stage it so that we can maximize the life of all the infrastructure. We're also looking again at a couple of new interchanges, looking at noise barriers where feasible and reasonable, and then also looking at bike and ped accommodations at the intersections, interchanges where we can make those local connections. So when we're looking at cost of this project, as Justin had mentioned, this project is currently at $3.7 billion. We performed a cost schedule risk assessment with our FHWA partners, as we do for all of our major projects. It gives a range of costs and all based on your project. Again, we're using the 70th percentile, which is standard for these types of projects. Looking at that versus the no build cost, as I had mentioned, we have infrastructure issues out there. Just to replace what we have out there would cost about $2.4 billion. And looking at these costs, it's about 2/3 or so the no build versus the build. That does align with kind of what we've been seeing on traditional majors. Normally, your costs are 60 to 70% of doing the pavement, doing the bridges, and then for an additional 30%, we get all of those safety and operational benefits for doing the full project, making all those geometric improvements. So looking at how does this cost compare it's obviously it's a big number, but it's a big project. When we're looking at some of our other majors that we've completed throughout the state, the I-3990 to the south, that one was going from 4 to 6 lanes, had 1 system interchange and was approximately $36 million per mile. The current I-41 project going on up in the northeast, that was going from 4 to 6, and they're at approximately $53 million a mile. And then the I-94 north-south, which was completed, that was going from 6 to 8 lanes with a system interchange, and that was at about $70 million per mile. So looking at that, its average is about that $50 million per mile mark. This project obviously has a combination of going from 4 to 6, 6 to 8, with 3 system interchanges. And right now we're averaging at about $56 million per mile. So it seems like it's right in that ballpark. When we're looking at the sequencing, again, we're trying to line up portions of the project with the assets that we have out there. So we'll be starting in the Wisconsin Dells area. That's where there's a lot of pavement issues as well as structural issues. So we'll be hitting that first, then jumping down to that 151 intersection, being able to reconstruct that and get the safety and operational benefits. Then back up to the north for the stretch in between Portage and the Dells, and then the Portage Triangle. And then back down number 5 there to the Beltline to 30, and then finally the expansion of the piece in between. I guess. Oh, okay.
They moved that.
Go ahead.
He's moving up. Anyways, I'll ask.
Sure, go ahead.
So being a Dells area legislator, knowing what it's like in the summer 29, summer 30, what kind of impact are you expecting on, say, Highway 12, 16, and 33 if people are trying to avoid that area? Is that something that's been under little consideration as people are trying to get on and off the construction and hitting those back state highways?
Yeah, I know with our construction along the entire main line, we're going to maintain the lanes of traffic that are out there today. So we're going to be minimizing impacts as much as we can. Construction's construction. It will. There are going to be times. We will have lane closures during off-peak times and other things. But for the most part, we're going to make sure that the road stays open to pretty much everybody. And the other thing to note with this as well, and Justin had mentioned it, we have a completion date out to 2051, but this is also taking a flat budget approach, but inflating the cost of the project out. So what we're looking at here is kind of a worst case scenario as far as finishing in 2051. If we're able to get additional funding or maintain or have a budget that keeps up with inflation, we're going to be able to knock at least 5 to 10 years off of that target completion time if we're able to get additional funding for this project. So that could be from potentially additional majors program funding or grants. We've had a pretty good history here of receiving federal grants. We've had the Blotnick with Minnesota for just over $1 billion, Wisconsin River Bridge for $80 million. We had a project down on I-41 get a $15 million grant, and then we've had a handful of rest areas as well that have received grants. So we've been looking at this project, finding the areas that we think would make good grant candidates, and identifying those, plus which programs they would qualify under. So if enumerated, we'll be ready to pursue additional funding opportunities. So again, mentioning this project has had significant support. We've had the coalition that has been formed in the support of the group. We've had coordination with municipalities. Village of DeForest just sent in a letter of recommendation for the project this past week. We've been coordinating with local officials, federal and state agencies, and we've just had overwhelming support for the project. So with that, this route is it's one of, if not the most important routes within the state. 94 north-south being one of the other major freight routes that was just recently expanded. This project, it facilitates all of those safety and operational benefits so that we can make sure that into the future we have a good flowing system that can get people in places through Wisconsin. So with that, we're requesting the TPC vote to recommend enumeration of this study as a traditional major project. I'll take any questions at this time. Say that again?
What does it mean to enumerate
To
something here? What does it mean to enumerate something?
I guess put it into the budget so that we can continue with final design and construction.
Correct.
Yeah. Apology. Recommendation to enumerate. So
Yeah, so the recommendation to enumerate the project, what that'll do is if it's enumerated through the biennial budget, there will be a specific reference to the project in statute that authorizes the department to spend construction funding on the project. So it authorizes us to commence construction. And then that the funding for that project would come out of whatever program level is approved for the major highway program through the biennial budget. So we still have to live within the budget that the legislature and the governor set through the biennial budget process for all of the projects that are enumerated. Does that help clarify?
Yeah.
Contact kind of question.
Contact.
Thank you. Yes, to enumerate means to put it on the list and get it in our process. My question is really needs to back up to the slide. The slides don't have a number on it, but it was the map. It shows that we're going down from 8 lanes at the Portage Triangle down to 6 lanes going up to the Wisconsin Dells, and I guess that would be 18 there. What's the decision-making process to take it from 8 to 6? I mean, that has historically been a congested area of roadway. We have an outstanding tourist area in the Wisconsin Dells. I can't imagine that that's going to get less. What is making us go from 8 to 6 at that point?
Yeah, I guess the split from the Portage interchange there up to the Dells is currently 4 lanes. So we're going to be going from 4 to 6 in that section. So
I understand that. Why are we not going from 6 to 8? Why are we not going from 4 to 8? 4 now. Why aren't we going to 8?
I think it's mostly just driven on the traffic demand within that area. Our heaviest area is in the southern area. In the Madison area up to the north, I think there's less traffic, so there's not a need for it at this point.
And that's based on car counts.
They break off on 30.
Yeah, we're losing, with that split there, we're a portion of traffic is heading north on 39 north, so we have less volume heading towards the Dells on 9094 there, and there isn't a need for a fourth lane or eighth lane.
Are we sure, Representative Krug?
I'll get back in the summer. Well, I'll keep my eyes on it.
You'll do a study.
Thank you for answering my question.
Go ahead.
I think you've done really a great job of laying out the need for the project and all the data. My concern is a little bit, there are other sections in the state that have, and I know my area a little bit better than the rest of the state, but in western Waukesha County, that 4 lane, so if you compare that 4 lane on I-94 to the 4 lane near the Dells, in Waukesha County, there's significantly more traffic and accidents. Now, you have to take into, as you've explained, a lot more factors, but we haven't studied that corridor yet for expansion. And when I look at your the potential sequencing slide all the way out to 2051, it makes me very nervous that that's 25 years. We might not be that need. And I hear from my colleagues around the state, I know we're not the only area that has needs. So the cost for this project it's a needed project. $3.7 billion. So that'll be the biggest project, I think, in state history. And so I guess my question is what are we doing to look at the whole need as we focus kind of all the resources on this or will there be other majors projects while this is going on?
Yeah. So couple of parts of that question. I'm going to address the 94 first. There is an ongoing study it's not a major or mega study, but the Southeast region is looking at that section of 94. So that is being looked at, and if that was to move forward, it would likely fall under a Southeast mega project. So that's one. Talking about the additional majors and other projects. This project, it is big, it is large, it is going to take some time, but there's room within there, as Justin kind of showed on some of those funding slides. There's room in there to still do some of our smaller major projects. We have the La Crosse corridor project coming up. We still have Stoughton and McFarland that's ongoing. We have the 51 North that I'll be talking about next, potentially talking about that project next. So we know that 39 is the big project, but we do have capacity to address those other needs out there. So our major studies process is still going to be occurring on those odd years. So we're still looking at those other areas of need throughout the state, and we'll bring those forward as needed. Thank you. Yep, Senator Emerson.
Since for me, so the last couple of summers with the construction around the Boston area and things like that on the 9094 corridor, almost every time I was driving from Eau Claire to Madison, we would get into stop traffic. So obviously there's a need to expand some of these roads, but I'm wondering, can you just talk about how DOT kind of balances that need for expanding and the construction that needs to happen without closing lanes down and making backup worse?
I think that might have been some of Tom Check's questions previously, as well as how do we look at all of these and how do we prioritize them? Yeah, so on the odd years, we look at every region kind of puts in some of their corridors that they believe is worthy of major study, major consideration. We also just do we have our own internal data, so we look at that, and we do kind of this statewide scan on a lot of these corridors, looking at traffic, safety, operations, and doing kind of and economic impacts, and doing kind of this comparative example from project to project. And so we have like a numerical rating system, and we want to make sure that whatever studies we're bringing forward are the top priorities within the state. So while there are needs existing in other areas, they may not rise to the level of some other corridors, just on a comparative basis. So while there might be needs out there, it's something that we can look at in the future, but we'd have to take a look at it versus everything else and see where we find the greatest investment.
How does the possible expansion of passenger rail and Amtrak and maybe getting a station in Madison at some point, would that take away some of the car traffic from this and help with capacity because we've got so much truck traffic on there, we still need to expand it?
Yeah, I mean, passenger, transit, rail, I think everything helps, but I don't think it's going to put a large enough dent into the future traffic demands that we're seeing out there to really not need this project.
Consideration as you all are looking at
Yep.
these projects. Okay.
Yep.
Just wanted to make sure.
We're doing a vote here.
So I think on that last, okay.
Senator? Tomczyk?
Well, you and I are amazingly on the same page, Governor. I want to vote on this project.
You never know. You never know. There might be more. So here we go. I don't know how to exactly say this. So we have a vote to recommend the enumeration of the study as a traditional major project as defined under Wisconsin Statute 84.03, paragraph 1A, 1M, in accordance with the Wisconsin statute. You can see it.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second here? And we have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Good work.
Thank you for that. I just want to do a time check because this meeting is until 11. We do want to go through the 51 project. I know people have had the binder and hopefully had a chance to review it, but Scott, can we move through that one?
If there's times, I'll touch on a couple project updates. If there's not, we'll just move past it. And those project updates are in the binder. So looking next at 51 Stoughton Road North. Again, going to go over the location, history, purpose and need, preferred alternatives, and sequencing and cost, and then our recommendations. So this is a north-south route on the east side of Madison, going from State Highway 30, or Wisconsin 30, 5.5 miles up to just south of the interstate. Traffic volumes in this area range from approximately 13,000 on the northern rural end down to almost 50,000 down near Wisconsin 30, which is a very busy urban freeway. Looking at this corridor, it's broken up into 3 fairly distinct segments. I'll start down in the southern section, which is one of the busiest. It has 6 lanes, 3 in either direction, 45 miles per hour. That goes from 30 all the way up to the East Washington Avenue intersection. From there, speed limit transitions to 35. We lose a lane in the northbound direction past the East Washington intersection. And then as we continue north, that gets into the just north of Anderson Street at Kinsman, we lose that lane in the southbound direction. So it's four lanes to another direction on the northern side as it goes into the more rural area and transitions back up to 55. Also noteworthy, the central segment is our highest pedestrian and bicycle area because there are local businesses, neighborhoods, as well as the MATC over in that area. So looking at the history of this project, similar track as I-39, it was kicked off in 2011. It was then paused in 2017 just due to funding and other priorities, and then started back up here in 2022. With that initial study, they were looking again at the same thing, safety and operations, although the alternatives they were looking at were looking at expansion, going from 4 to 6, having grade separated combinations of grade separated and at grade intersections. So much larger footprints, much more impacts. So today, again, taking that new approach, we're splitting this corridor at Wisconsin 30, as seeing as how the northern and southern sections operate much differently from each other. And on the northern side here, we've been investigating lower impact alternatives that are more in line with community planning and interests of the key stakeholders in the area. So looking at the purpose and need of this study, there's been a significant amount of crashes, 2 fatalities, as well as 12 serious injuries during the study time frame. There has also been, unfortunately, 2 additional fatalities this past year, one being this past Friday at the Wisconsin 30 intersection. So we've got a lot of crashes that are mostly focused around the intersections along this corridor. So that's where we're going to be focusing most of the efforts. Also, there's some geometric deficiencies. There's a large skew angle at the East Washington interchange. It hooks right if you're going north. And then there's also some substandard S curves that exist in the northern segment as well. So looking at safety, going again south to north, that purple and pink, those represent, or all of these represent statewide crash averages. The purple and pink are somewhere between 3 and 4 times higher than the statewide average. The middle section there, yellow and orange, is about 1.5 times the statewide average. And on the northern section, it's green, it's below the statewide average, but we do know that we have issues at that S curve, as well as some problematic intersections up in the north. So when we're looking at some of these intersections, we know that we have issues down at 30, East Washington, Anderson, and then CV up in the north. And as we look into the future, we get additional traffic on this. We have some more of those intersections that will eventually start to break down even further. So looking again at this level of service map, the green dots are our A's, B's, and C's, and then the rest are represented by their letter D, E, and F. And a little bit different than kind of the mainline feel for level of service. This is intersection level of service. So if you're pulling up to an intersection and you're at an A, B, C, or D, you're likely to get through with 1 light cycle at the most. When you're in an E and F scenario, there's a lot more traffic. You're stuck there for 2+ light cycles, and that's generally when people driver behavior takes over. People make worse decisions. They run yellows. That's where we can get into some unsafe conditions. And also, so our existing conditions are on the left side there. Future conditions for 2050 are on the right. As you can see, our Fs, they don't go from F to F minus. That's the lowest grade that we assign them. And those, while we don't give them a lower grade, the operations at those intersections can certainly get worse. So now you're at 3-ish light cycles, backups on the main line, and other problems. And again, we have some of those geometric issues, the skew angle at East Washington, which if anyone's ever driven that one, it doesn't meet driver expectations as with that large hook in there. If you stop paying attention for a second, you accidentally drift into another lane as you're trying to get through there. Also, we again mentioned the S curves up in the northern side where there was a fatality this past year. So looking at an overview of the preferred alternative, the study project itself goes through various alternatives, goes out to public meetings, gets local stakeholder feedback. And this is an example of the preferred alternative for the East Washington intersection. And for all of these intersections up and down the corridor, the preferred alternative is to maintain what's out there, but make significant upgrades to it. So if there's a signalized intersection out there today, there's going to be a signalized intersection out there tomorrow. However, we're making all the improvements to it that we can. So for the East Washington intersection example, there's going to be median separated left turn lanes. We're going to be looking at access control, consolidating access, because there's a lot of conflict points around that area. Looking at doing some right-of-way acquisition and cul-de-sacing an area there in the southwest quadrant, as well as continuing that 3rd lane northbound beyond the East Washington intersection. It'll then drop back to 2. So for the preferred alternative, the example there with East Washington, that's similar to pretty much all of the intersections. They're all going to have those separated left turn lanes. We're going to be lengthening the turn lanes. We're going to be looking at that access control and optimizing signal timing for all of the intersections along the corridor. So this alternative focuses pretty much on the intersections and the operations and safety around those intersections. We're no longer looking at capacity expansion, as was the previous study. For this route, it's not needed, so we're not recommending it. And again, some of the additional things that we'll get to is the S curves on the northern side. They have both horizontal and vertical. They're over standards on both their horizontal and vertical curves. We're looking at pedestrian accommodations going from Wisconsin 30 to just north of Anderson Street there. Again, in that more heavily pedestrian area. And also proposing a potential pedestrian bridge over East Washington to help facilitate that movement as well. And then also looking at a reduction of speed in the southern segment from 45 to 40 to help with pedestrian safety down there. So how are we going to build this one? We're going to start up in the north section where we can coordinate with the I-3990 project. We want to make sure that if the potential Hepker interchange goes in, we want to make sure that this one is prepared for it, as well as coordinating on the northern side there with the 3990, 94 intersection. And then we'll be able to address the pavement needs in the S-curve in the northern section. Next, we'll jump down to the south, get the Highway 30 improvements, as well as address the pavement needs that exist down there. And there are some vertical site distance issues with the hills that exist in that southern segment that we'll be able to take care of. And then lastly, we'll go to the middle section, the East Washington Avenue interchange, address that intersection, put in that pedestrian accessibility, and then continue our ongoing coordination with the City of Madison. So this project is currently at $174 million with fairly minimal relocations and right-of-way needs, as opposed to the original concept, which again was looking at full expansion. And you can see that there's many more relocations, many more right-of-way takings that would have needed to occur. So with that, we're recommending and requesting that the TPC vote to approve this study for construction as a high-cost major. If it's approved, we'll begin final design here end of 2025, construction likely to begin in 2029, and then anticipated completion of 2033.
Any questions? Any questions?
Yes, sir. I have a question about the, thank you. I have a question about the northern section, I believe on that would be the first section you propose to work on. That's you had a slide up that showed it was green, having not as much concern as the southern end. Are we doing that section just because we're already on there, or what? Again, it goes back to how are we prioritizing these projects? What's making that section and this whole stretch elevate to being the whole thing?
So I think, that section, in order to align with 39, I think that section needs to go first. Also, we know that we're going to have, as you can kind of see up on this slide here, we know that some of the intersections that exist there today that work fine are not going to exist there tomorrow and are not going to work as well if we don't address it. So being able to hit this area first will align with I-39, and we'll be able to make sure that those intersections remain in good conditions.
Okay.
Other questions? All right. Yes, that'd be great. We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none. All those in favor say, do we have a quick?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Governor.
Senator.
Thank you. I'm very talkative today. I have grave concerns over this, maybe not grave concerns, but I have concerns over the prioritizing of some of these projects. We heard someone else talk about the 94 in Waukesha, and I agree, there's sections there. So I would very much look forward to learning more about how these projects and how these sections are prioritized, and how many studies can we have going at one time, and how do we pick where we're going. And I understand there's capacities of the system, but I need to be better educated on that. I will be voting no on this project simply for that fact. I don't know much about south of East Washington, but I drive 51 from 39 to East Wash every time I come to Madison. And are there concerns? Sure. Are there worse parts of the state? Yes. So, thank you.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
As I mentioned, there's project updates in the binder, but I think we're kind of at our time here. So if there's any questions, I'll be around. Thank you.
Are we done? We're done. We need a motion to adjourn, folks. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion
Aye.
carries.